We're now joined by Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen. Good to have you here.
It's great to be with you, Margaret.
So in these final days of Democratic control of the Senate and the White House, there's a long to-do list. Congress has to fund the government by end of December, pass the defense bill, the NDAA, an extension to the Farm Bill, and I know Democrats want to confirm as many judges as possible. What's top of your list?
Well, all of those are on the list. Top of my list is also the disaster relief funding, emergency relief. We had big parts of the country hit by hurricanes and other natural disasters. In my state of Maryland, we had the collapse of the Key Bridge in Baltimore. So we've always taken the approach that the whole country will be there to help fellow Americans in need. The president has now submitted a $100 billion emergency disaster relief plan that includes funding for the Key Bridge. So I hope that we will get that done by the end of the year. People need that relief, and they need it now.
That's about $8 billion for the bridge alone, is that right?
Not for the bridge alone. That's part of the emergency relief fund that includes approximately $2 billion for the bridge.
And you're relatively confident that this can be delivered on?
I hope that all of our colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, will support disaster relief. We've always had the philosophy, all for one and one for all. When Americans get hit by these disasters, I hope we will stick with that position.
Well, we also are looking at a new Congress very soon, and as you know, a new commander-in-chief. Republicans will have the majority in the Senate with 53 seats, so they don't really need Democratic votes to confirm many of the picks that Mr. Trump has been making to run agencies. But from what you've seen to date, are you in favor of any of them? Your colleague Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, for example, or this new choice to be Labor Secretary?
Look, my view is this is what the vetting process is all about, the hearing process. The Senate, of course, under the Constitution, has the job of advising and consenting on nominations, and I take that responsibility very seriously. I've been troubled by some talk that President-elect Trump wants to short-circuit that constitutional approach using this recess appointment device, and it will be really important that the new Republican leader in the Senate uphold the Senate's prerogatives under the Constitution and not try to do an end run.
Mm-hmm. Well, stay tuned to see how that plays out. Let's turn to the Middle East. You said that President Biden's inaction to halt the horrific humanitarian situation inside of Gaza is a stain on his administration, that it's shameful. Is there anything in these final weeks that could be done to erase that stain?
I think there are things that can be done. And I should emphasize that I supported President Biden's decision to travel to Israel in the aftermath of the brutal Hamas attacks of October 7th of last year and stand with the people of Israel as they confront this threat. But I also wish the president had effectively used U.S. leverage to essentially assert his own positions. We've seen this pattern where President Biden makes demands of Prime Minister Netanyahu only to be ignored or slapped down entirely. And then President Biden sends more bombs and more money. Mm-hmm. That is not an effective use of leverage. So I do hope in these closing months, the president will finally make more effective use of American leverage to, at the very least, uphold American law, to insist that the Netanyahu government allow humanitarian aid into Gaza and that they use our weapons in a manner consistent with the laws of war.
So you take a nuanced and specific stand on that, upholding U.S. law. This is often characterized, though, as being for or against helping Israel. There were 19 senators, you were one of them, who voted this past week to pause specific shipments on 3 different groups of weapons, offensive weapons, to Israel. You said the State Department's reviewing 500 incidents where U.S. weapons were used and caused unnecessary civilian harm. The State Department has said Israel's doing things to fix the situation, which is why weapons continue to be greenlit. Are you suggesting that's a lie?
I'm suggesting that the President of the United States is not fully complying with American law on this question. If you look at the letter that was sent by Secretaries Austin and Secretary Blinken to Israeli authorities in October, you look at that final paragraph, you'll see that they're complaining about the fact that there is no effective mechanism right now for getting to the bottom of claims of civilian harm. The State Department has, as I said, about 500, as you said, and we haven't gotten to the bottom of those.
Why?
Because the process is broken, and I would argue that there's not been the will to fix the process because a lot of people don't want the process to produce the obvious answer, which is there have been many cases where we've seen U.S. weapons used in violation of international humanitarian law. In fact, if you go back to the NSM 20 report, earlier this year, the Biden administration said specifically that there was a high likelihood that U.S. weapons were being used in violation of international law, and yet they've done nothing in the intervening period to enforce that.
When I've pressed U.S. officials on this privately, they've said, what do you want us to do? You want us to put in a halt for a few weeks and then Donald Trump reverses it? What's the point? How do you respond to that?
Well, the point is they should have been doing this for a much longer period of time. The president had ample opportunities over the last year. There are many people in the administration, at the senior level, who told me that this war was going to come to an end back in January. I've met with hostage families on numerous occasions who've been calling out Prime Minister Netanyahu for not agreeing to a ceasefire and a return of their loved ones. Minister Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, was fired because he wanted to prioritize the return of hostages. And yet President Biden has never called out Prime Minister Netanyahu for his obstruction on this, even though those families I met with are calling him out.
Even post-election, why do you think he won't do that?
I really don't know. I just don't know why the President of the United States has not been willing to make more effective use of American leverage to assert his own stated objectives. I mean, he's been ignored on other things too, right? He wants the PA to be the nucleus of governance in a post-war Gaza. He wants a two-state solution. Prime Minister Netanyahu has not only ignored those, he's gone out there and bragged about how he's blocking President Biden's efforts. And yet the blank check just keeps on coming. So what my colleagues and I are saying is, let's just pause these transfers of offensive weapons, certain ones, until the Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government come into compliance with American law. These are American laws on the books. So this is not about whether we support Israel or not. Of course we support Israel. It's about whether our support is used in a manner consistent with American law and American values.